Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the NAACP Chicago Westside branch half hour in which we're going to talk about issues that are affecting you today in your community. Today, our topic will be on the revision of the Fraternal Order of Police contract. We're going to talk about the recommendations made by the Coalition for Police Contracts Accountability Group, and they have done some revisions that we went over last week. This week we are going to talk about them more. We're going to finish them up and cover all 14. I'll do a slight review and then I will finish up with the rest of those topics. Before we get started with that, I want to say that you can contact the Westside NAACP at thewestsidennaacp@gmail.com or call us at the number shown, or come and check us out the first Saturday of every month at 1 o'clock p.m. at 5820 West Chicago Avenue. We are very excited to get talking about this Fraternal Order contract revision, but before we get started on that, I wanted to talk about one issue that's been brought up to my attention as of recently. As I, in my part-time, in my private life, I bake cakes for a living, and of course I use a lot of chocolate to do that. One day while at work, one of my coworkers came up and asked me not to use the chocolate of a particular company because they were known to use slave labor or child slave labor to produce their chocolate. I looked into the issue and I found that it's true. A lot of the large organizations and the chocolate companies do use child slave labor, the whole gambit that you think about when you think about child slave labor, to get their chocolate. And these children are either sold by their parents or they are kidnapped and brought onto the plantation to pick and handle chocolate using awful weapons and some very poor living conditions. Of course, they are beat if they get tired or if they're in any way inefficient, and they are locked up at night to make sure that they're not able to get away. And so, like I said, everything you think about when you think about slavery occurs to these children. A reported 1.1 million children are suffering like this along the Ivory Coast. And so I'm making decisions about how I'm not going to be using chocolate products, and I encourage you to make similar decisions about how you do that. Look it up, look into different websites. If you type it in about chocolate slavery, you'll find a lot of information about what is and is not happening on the other side of the world that gives us the chocolate, or 43% of the chocolate that feeds the globe. So I encourage you to look into that and make the right choice. If you have any questions today about anything that we're going to discuss, you can call us in. I look forward to your calls at 312-738-1060. I look forward to you asking me any questions about what I just said and also about these FOP recommendations that we're going to be making. We're going to start off with the first recommendation, and that is to eliminate the requirement of a sworn affidavit for investigating civilian complaints of misconduct. Allow for the filing and investigation of anonymous complaints is number 2. Number 3 is to prevent the disclosure of a complaint's name prior to the interrogation of an accused officer. Number 4 is remove the ban on offering rewards to officers that cooperate or provide information on ongoing investigations. Number 5 is allow past disciplinary records to be used in investigating and resolving present complaints. And then number 7 is eliminate the provision requiring the destruction of police misconduct records. And number 8 is eliminate the need for the superintendent's authorization to investigate complaints that are 5 years or older. I believe that is about where we finished and we left off last week, is talking about why these various complaints or why these various recommendations are necessary in order for us to have a more just society within the city of Chicago. We talked about these things. If you don't know, I'll give you a little background that the Fraternal Order of Police is a union that represents a great deal of the police within Chicago, of the 12,000 officers that are here. Their contract is going to be expiring June of 2017, which is coming up pretty soon, next month. And the City Council will be voting to approve a new contract with them. In the past, the city council, that means your alderman or alderwoman, has said yes to various policies and standards that basically mean that if an officer does something unjust or completes some kind of misconduct against you, they will not really pay the price to the law. There is a number of provisions set up to kind of help officers lie, help officers upkeep a code of silence, and help them to generally just hide the truth so that they won't be accused or even, I should say, convicted of any kind of misconduct, much less a crime, should something happen to you on the street. And I do want to clarify, these provisions, if they're changed, if these recommendations are made, some people say, we've heard some feedback that, oh, you're going to just do all of this against cops and they're not all bad people and we should not be coming against them in this way. And I agree, that is very true. But if you accept these recommendations, an officer that is acting justly and doing as he should be or she should be in protecting and serving will never have to worry about the recommendation changes that we're making, because they're only for officers that are really repeat offenders of misconduct. They're not even going to dramatically affect an officer that just does a small incident, a small policy break, not a crime, and they'll still have other opportunities. These recommendations are going to get those who are repeat offenders and or just flat out criminals. So we're going to get back to those recommendations, and it says remove constraints on how interrogators can ask questions. The next recommendation is specify that information provided to officers prior to interrogation should be general resuscitation of allegations, which basically means that they're just repeating what the allegation originally was rather than coming up with new allegations about why an officer is being accused of a particular crime or policy break. These recommendations really cover more policy breaks. They do have some connotation to actual criminal behavior, but usually in the sense of criminal behavior, they have to investigate that situation before it can be deemed criminal. So these recommendations are kind of a preliminary to a more heinous crime or accusation. Allow for the disclosure of the identities of officers who are the subject of civilian complaints. So as you saw in the first couple of recommendations, if you make a complaint against an officer, you have to identify who you are to the officer, to the public, and let it be known that you are the person making this particular complaint. That officer's name, on the other hand, is not publicized. And while there can be some understanding about why they shouldn't have to say who they are and what they've been doing, quite frankly, if they're never identified as being the person who did a particular crime or broke a certain policy, then their records are not really being upheld. They're not really being recognized for what they did and what they contributed to that situation. Our next recommendation is to require officers to disclose secondary employment and any other pertinent information that may cause a conflict of interest in performing their duties as a sworn officer. And this is pretty much kind of the standard of what occurs anytime you have a job. When you have a job, when I used to work in government, I had to disclose what other things I was doing when I was on my personal time. And while I could have some personal issues about having to disclose to my job what I'm doing later on when I'm not on that job, in the terms of an officer, they are working in a higher order and in an honorable order. And there are times when different jobs they have can be causing external stressors that affect them when they're on duty. If they're constantly in a situation where they're seeing a lot of conflict, it can cause some stress, some things that kind of roll over and pass off into their public life as a servant to the public. And so they need to be able to disclose what's going on with them as a full person, so that if they do need some assistance, they do need some relief, some stress relief, they're able to get that because they've been completely forward in what they're doing and what's going on with them all the time. Next is reduce years of seniority for officers who have been repeatedly recommended for suspension because of findings of complaints filed against them. And so if you read the Department of Justice report, it stated that there were officers who had multiple complaints against them for various kinds of violations. And that those officers, if they had 12 years on the force, they continue to get whatever seniority that might have granted them from having that much time on the force. And that those complaints and those procedures and those processes didn't in any way hinder their progression to the next step within their leadership or the pecking order of officers, their ability to choose where they work, their hours, all the things that generally people get when they have seniority on the job was never hindered by the fact that they had acquired numerous amount of complaints, or that a very serious and maybe even criminal complaint was they were being accused of, and that their case was still being, and a lot of times, investigated over the years, over all the times that it takes them to actually get through a complaint process, that they were still being progressed to supervisor and other roles while they were waiting on this. And so we are saying that when you have that going on, what you want to do is make sure that their seniority is kind of pulled back and that they're not able to just progress regardless of the complaints. Looks like we have a caller, so caller, I can hear you. Please let me know.
Yes, good evening. You know, every day, every week, I see people up there, like you, young lady, complaining. We don't have to complain anymore if we get the right people in office, so this way they can help us. African Americans, Hispanics, get their own people in. We'll have a big change on the fifth floor. We have a big change with some of these aldermen where it seems that they don't care anymore. Because before we used to complain to our African-American aldermen, or there's not enough Hispanic aldermen. We have plenty now, and still nothing changes. So we got to get out there, get our people in, and then you'll see a better and fairer police department. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. I agree. I don't think of myself so much as complaining as I am reporting the facts so that everybody knows what's going on, but I am reporting these facts so that we can make determinations about how we vote. More than about 2 years ago, I was on here saying these are the facts about various candidates, and these are why you should choose this candidate or over another, even though we don't really say who to vote for, but we were giving you the facts on various candidates and various things that you should be looking for in any kind of office, elected official role. The reason why we were doing that is because these people make decisions that affect us in our everyday lives. And a lot of times, because we only vote every 2 years for a particular office, we think, oh, I'm going to vote this one time and then I don't have to be a part of this process. I can kind of go and relax until it's time to come and vote again. But what we're not recognizing is in those 2 to 4 years that we're waiting to vote again, this person is acting on our behalf or against our behalf. And when we go to make our decisions to vote, we need to make sure that we're following up on what our aldermen or alderwomen are doing. How are they voting? What are they saying? What are they doing when they're going into that office? Are they really representing our views? And yes, you do need more people that are more representative of the population. The population of the city council should be representative of the population of the people. And in a lot of instances, that does not occur because people are not holding their office, their elected officials, accountable. They are coming in, they're voting against your personal views, they're voting against what you want, they're voting against your safety, and nobody is holding them accountable for it. And so the way that we hold accountable is that we have to let people know what's going on. I'm here to let you know that the FOP contract is approved by your city council. They are the ones who go in and say yay or nay. In a lot of instances, they don't know what's in the contract either. They're saying yes in a kind of rubber stamp format to whatever that FOP contract says, whatever the city council, and when I say the council, I mean the lawyers, Whatever council tells them is okay and something that they should agree to, they just say, yes, let's go with it. They don't look into it. They don't know what it's about. And they're not making decisions that are representative of you. They're not making decisions that are representative of themselves. They're just voting yes because it's time to vote again. And they're doing the same thing that we're doing. We're just voting yes because it's time to vote again, rather than truly looking into those issues, finding out what's going on, and then holding people to the fire saying, did you know that this was occurring? And if you didn't know, why didn't you know? And what are you going to do next time to make sure that this does not occur again? So I'm out here ringing the bell. I'm out here saying this contract is coming up. It's going to expire soon in June of 2017. And if we don't start raising the bells, ringing the bells, and saying, hey, did you realize that this says this and this allows this and this is affecting us in this way, then we're going to just keep getting more of the same. It's time to open our mouths and let people know that we have power. It's not only on the ballot, but it happens all year long, every day, because these situations are affecting us all year long and every day. And they hold us down. To that point, while we're talking about elected officials, I kind of wanted to start hearing some calls about the idea that we currently have some aldermen who are saying that we should be bringing assault weapons into the city, that officers should be carrying assault weapons, not unlike the assault weapons they believe criminals on the streets are carrying. I really want to know your thoughts about that. Please call in and let me know what you think. It looks like we have a caller now. Hi, caller. I can hear you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I think one of our problems is that we don't have enough young people like yourself that is interested or getting into politics, because we still have these old politicians in there with these old ideas. They're nothing to me but power brokers. All they do is just make deals. They don't do anything to that has the interest of their constituents like you and I. And when it's time to come and vote, all they do is just vote. They don't care about what your interest is, because we don't put enough effort in holding our officials accountable. And I love your show, and you are. I love this pertinent information that you put out there for us. And I wonder how many people are out there listening to you and know what you are talking about.
I thank you. I thank you for the compliment, and I agree with you on that also. Young people are not being engaged enough. When we have meetings, often they're the last people to show up, and they really want to do a lot of kind of rebel rousing, which we definitely need. Don't get me wrong, but we also need you to show up on the back end. We need you to be able to put in the work, to know what's going on, and be able to make your voice be heard and on paper, because that's where it comes down that it matters, that we need to be able to change our policies and make policies that affect us all. And to that point, to the point of young people not being involved enough, I really go to question, how much do we as adults involve our young people when they're children? How much do we engage our children and say, hey, you know, you're supposed to vote. That's a part of your duty. You, as an American, you're supposed to get up and vote, and you're not supposed to vote in ignorance. You're supposed to know who you're voting for, why you're voting for them, and making sure that they're supporting your platform. Last week, I recently listened to some authors who said, you know, we can't just wait for people to get up and say, hey, I'm going to do this, and if you vote for me, I'm going to, you know, make sure there's a chicken in every oven. We need to create platforms as citizens, as individuals, and then go out and say, now who's representing us? Who's representing this? If you want my vote, then you need to take these ideas up and fight for my ideas in the council. That we call them elected officials, but they're really elected representatives, and yet they're not representing us. And they're not representing us because they don't have to. They represent the powers that be, like you said, power brokers, because those are the people who are really making their decisions. They know that if they come to their citizenry and they make a bad decision, or they make a decision that does not represent the people as a whole, that in a year or so, when their election time comes back around, people will forget. And that's generally why when you get close to election seasons, you'll start to notice that a lot of decisions are not being made. They'll start to put things on hold and kind of say, oh, we're just going to wait for the new election season. That's because they don't want to, while they're very close to that election season, make the wrong decision that people will remember when they get to the ballot box. So they kind of try to hold off making decisions, hold off putting things in order so that they can get the vote based on the fact that you forgot what they didn't do for you back when. And that's something that we have to make sure that we don't do as people. We have to make sure that our memories are in place. Write it down, make a note of it. Know, really more importantly, know what you stand for. Know what's important to you. When I come back in a little while, we'll be talking about assault weapons. The NAACP is going to make an opinion about what we think about assault weapons being in the hands of officers. When I've been hearing this, and I've been trying to avoid being a part of this this topic, because there's so many other things, there's so many things going on that we're fighting for, that I try to block myself, but I couldn't block myself from the idea of assault weapons. And as I continue to talk to some of our topic experts, we do speak with some policeman experts. They said something very interesting to me that I thought was the most striking idea about assault weapons. They said if you give an officer an assault weapon, basically a brand new toy, they're going to look for reasons to use it. And as things stand right now, as police misconduct in Chicago stands right now, officers already don't know when to shoot. And so you have an officer who doesn't know when to shoot, you give them a much more powerful weapon, and when they start blowing through walls, hitting children, hitting people inside of their homes, we're going to start wondering, did we really make the best choice? When you start thinking about the idea of assault weapons hitting your streets, don't think that this is going to be a problem that does not affect you, because the nature of an assault weapon is that it can go through people, walls, and anything. So even if an officer does have good aim, they are trying to shoot the right person, as we're going to call them. They may shoot that person, that bullet goes through them, and 4 or 5 other people behind them, or objects behind them. Do you really want to walk up and down your street and see bullet holes, gauge holes all throughout your cars, all throughout your buildings, until eventually they start getting into people? Is that what you want in the city? Do you want to be occupied? Do you want to deal with the harshness that comes with occupation? We first need to fix the system of how officers are being held accountable for their actions, and also making sure that they're just properly trained from the get-go street before we start saying, let's bring in higher, stronger weapons, things that really shouldn't be in the hands of anyone, because they're just made as the killing machines, made to destroy, made to blow off body parts and blow through people. And we really should not be putting something in the hands of anyone that makes them the final judge and jury, the final say of what goes on. If someone does something wrong, they should be apprehended and stopped so that they can go to court and go through their full due process. If you give someone an assault weapon, you're really just giving them a right to kill and murder. And that's not the right that any one person should have over another, especially in situations where stress can be high. Officers are in a very tense situation all the time, and they're not always able to use their best judgment at the time, because the situation is running. Their adrenaline is running. They're human beings like everyone else. And we shouldn't be putting them in a predicament where they might be making decisions that they'll later regret, that might start having emotional stress issues for them that can make problems worse for them down the line. So these are all the things that we want to consider when we start talking about bringing assault weapons into Chicago. I tell you, make sure that you consider all the consequences. If assault weapons into our city. There's a whole nother idea about if the criminal behavior, or the criminal community starts knowing that the officers have assault weapons, they might actually decide to shoot that officer first, because they feel like if they don't get the officer first, they'll be shot and killed. So it's something that we always have to remember, that there's a lot of consequences and a bit of a lake effect when we want to have these or ripple effect, I should say, I'm sorry, when we want to have assault weapons go into the hands of anyone. Before we go, I just want to remind you that you can contact the Westside NAACP at westsidennAACP@gmail.com. You can call us at 773-261-5890, or come and check out one of our meetings at 1 o'clock every first Saturday of the month, except for in July, at 5820 West Chicago Avenue, Chicago, Illinois, 60651. I thank you for watching today, and I thank you even more for calling in. Goodbye.